The last time I saw my cousin Ao, she was whispering to herself in the dark. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were torn, and her eyes were swollen and red, like she'd been crying for hours, maybe even days. She barely looked like herself. No one wanted to go near her, not even her husband. And his mother, well, she was the reason Ao ended up like that. I should probably start at the beginning. Ao and I were close growing up. She was like a sister to me after her parents passed away when she was young. She came to live with us, and we practically raised her as family. She was gentle, soft-spoken, and always kind, the type who never wanted trouble with anyone. People loved her for that. Everyone knew she had suffered enough and deserved some happiness. When she got married, we all thought this was finally her chance at peace. Her husband, Connor, came from a respected family. His mother was one of the wealthiest women in the area and had a reputation for being strict but fair. When Ao was engaged, everyone congratulated her. They thought she was lucky. Connor seemed like a decent man, and with a family like that, it looked like Ao's life was set. But what we didn't know was that Connor's mother, Mama, was hiding something dark beneath her proud, smiling face. On the day of the wedding, something strange happened. I was helping Ao get ready, smoothing out her dress, adjusting her hair. She looked so beautiful, but her hands were trembling. I thought it was just nerves. As we were about to leave the room, Mama called her over. She grabbed Ao's wrist tightly, pulling her close, and whispered something in her ear. I couldn't hear what she said, but I saw Ao's face. Her expression went from excitement to pure fear. I'd never seen her so scared. After that, Ao was quiet, distracted. She barely spoke to anyone for the rest of the night, and it wasn't like her at all. At first, we didn't think much of it. People get nervous at weddings, and Mama had a way of making everyone feel small. But soon after, Ao's letters home became less cheerful. She'd write less and less, and when she did, her words seemed distant. She was losing weight, looking tired, and seemed more like a shadow of herself. Whenever I visited her, Mama would hover around, watching us with a look that sent chills down my spine. Ao was hardly allowed to speak freely. If she laughed, Mama would glare at her until she stopped. If she asked for anything, Mama would mock her, saying things like, "You're nothing but an orphan. Who do you think you are to make demands in my house?" Ao started hearing strange things at night. She'd wake up to hear soft whispers right outside her door, footsteps moving through the halls, and a voice calling her name from somewhere in the dark. It wasn't Connor. He was often away on business, leaving Ao alone with his mother in that big, empty house. Ao told me she'd hear a soft knock on her door in the middle of the night. She'd open it, but no one would be there. She thought it was all in her head, maybe just dreams, but the fear in her voice told me she believed it was something more. One evening, Ao found something hidden under her bed. A small clay pot wrapped in a dirty cloth. Inside were strange things, dried herbs, tiny bones, and a little doll made of straw, tied with red string. She stared at it, horrified, not knowing what to think. She didn't understand what it was or why it was there, but it felt like something wrong, something dark. She dropped the pot, and it shattered across the floor. That's when Mama appeared, standing in the doorway. She looked furious, her eyes narrowed, her face twisted with anger. "You think you belong here, don't you?" she hissed. "You're just a poor orphan. You'll never be good enough for my son." Ao was too scared to speak. She stood frozen, watching as Mama picked up the broken pieces of the pot, muttering something under her breath that sounded like a curse. After that night, things took a turn for the worse. Ao started falling sick. She'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for breath, feeling like something heavy was pressing down on her chest. She could hardly eat, and her skin became pale. Her hair began to fall out in clumps, and she had bruises and scratches on her arms, like something had clawed at her in her sleep. I went to see her one day, and she pulled me aside, whispering that she felt like she was being watched all the time. She told me Mama had started leaving little bowls of something outside her door, bowls filled with blackened feathers, ashes, and blood. She didn't know what it meant, but she could feel something changing inside her. She looked haunted, like someone trapped in a nightmare they couldn't escape. "I think she's trying to make me leave," Ao said, her voice shaking. "Or worse. I begged her to leave, to come back to our village. But she refused. If I go, something terrible will happen," she whispered. "I can feel it." I could see the fear in her eyes, but there was something else too, something that told me she'd given up hope. It was like she'd already accepted her fate. One night, not long after that, Ao disappeared. The servants found her at dawn, lying by the river, her dress soaked, her skin pale and cold. She was alive, barely, but she looked like she'd been through a storm. They carried her back to the house, but she was hardly herself. She wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat. She just lay there, staring at the ceiling, her lips moving as if she were talking to someone only she could see. The doctor said she was exhausted, that maybe she'd sleepwalk to the river. But Ao told me later, when she was able to speak, that something had pulled her there. Something cold and invisible, something that whispered her name in the middle of the night, had dragged her out of bed. She said she felt like she was in a trance, like she couldn't control her own body. I believed her. From that day on, she was a ghost. Her spirit was gone. She'd sit for hours, staring into nothing, whispering to herself. Her mother-in-law kept watching her with that same cruel smile, as if she was proud of what she'd done. She didn't even try to hide it. Whenever I visited, she'd stand in the doorway, arms crossed, watching us, making sure Ao couldn't speak freely. I tried to get Ao to come with me, to leave that place, but she would just shake her head and say, "It's too late." The last time I visited, Ao didn't recognize me. She just sat there, whispering in a language I didn't understand, her eyes empty, her voice hollow. It was like she was gone already. And Mama stood nearby, smirking, her arms crossed, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. She'd taken everything from Ao, her health, her happiness, her spirit. As I left, I heard Ao's broken whisper echoing through the house, "She took everything from me, everything." The words lingered in the air, haunting, as if the house itself was repeating them. I knew, deep down, that I'd never see Ao again, not as she once was.